Go Long by Hazel Witch. Read by Kaiinbed. Chapter 10. A Victim of Inappropriate Footwear. Content warning. This chapter has mild mentions of blood and injury, so please just be aware of that. Eat my fucking dust! Pins clattered at the end of the lane, flung in all different directions. Katsuki spun on his heel and surveyed the group with his chin set back. Better be taking notes, losers. There's no way any of you are gonna catch up with me now. The TV above his head cut to an animation of the pins being sliced through with an axe. Another strike. Was there anything he wasn't good at? Only thing I'm making notes on is how long it takes for your head to explode with all that ego. Mina heckled from where she was squeezed between Eijiro's bulging bicep and Ida's puffed up chest. Swear to God, I could pop it like a balloon, you're so full of hot air. The booth broke out into giggles and snickers, Katsuki looking pissed at the lack of adoration. He stomped back to his seat with a scowl, worming his way in next to Izuku, elbowing Todoroki in the process. Jealous fucks, whole lot of you, he grumbled, taking a slurp of blue slushy and crossing his arms. Izuku tried to conceal a grin and patted at him lightly, soaking up the easy atmosphere, eyes flitting between each cheerful face. It'd been Kirishima's suggestion to bring both squads together, or at least that's how Katsuki had presented it. They were several weeks deep into the spring semester, college applications behind them, and a dose of senioritis settling in that meant everyone was more willing to take their foot off the gas, free and keen to be dumb teenagers in the stretch of time before admission letters landed in mailboxes and the future came knocking. Izuku was trying to savor it for once. I'm up next! Kaminari sprung to his feet, energetic as always, rubbing gleeful hands together. I'll give you a run for your money, my man. Everyone, cover your heads! Hanta yelled, clamping his elbows around his ears in a braced position. Kaminari threw him a look that could rival a hurt puppy, pink fluorescent light flickering across his face. That was one time! I'm not gonna let go on the backswing again, jeez! I believe in you, Denki! Ochako piped up, slipping into the role of cheer captain with ease. You can do it! The big fat zero next to Kaminari's name on the computerized scoring system begged to differ, but apparently encouraged, he selected the heaviest of bowling balls and earned himself a chorus of groans. Here we go again. I'm serious, guys. We're all wearing hard hats next time. Delirious laughter began anew, and Izuku nestled back against slightly sticky leather, watching happily as the amalgamated group traded quips and banter. This is nice, he said with a contented sigh. Katsuki rolled his head to the side to look at him. What is? Watching Kaminari almost drop a dead weight on his toe for the 1000th time? Their faces were close, resting back against the booth almost nose to nose. If they were alone, Izuku would lean in to kiss him. Instead, he just shook his head and turned back to face their slightly odd jumble of friends. Just this, he said, smiling, feeling Kachan's eyes on him. It's nice that we can all hang out. Before Katsuki could respond, there was a yelp of disbelief from Denki as the force of his throw carried him over the foul line, and an angry red cross lit up next to his name. Oh, you're kidding me! You're up next, Midoriya, Todoroki said from where he'd been quietly nodding along to the 80s power ballad blaring in the background. You'll actually take over the lead from Bakugo if you get a strike this round. Now that sounded like a challenge. Raising his eyebrows, Izuku slipped away from the long line of body heat that was Katsuki's side and took up position with the ball that proved to be his lucky charm so far, breathing slow and concentrating on the 10 white pins. One quick, calculated swing, and the ball hit the ground and rolled, rumbling. Just the right amount of spin, just the right speed. Strike. Woohoo! Well done, Izuku! Show Bakugo who's boss. Izuku turned, quietly triumphant as the others swarmed him into a group hug, letting the cheers and praise sink in as 8 pairs of clown shoes squeaked against the floor. So this is what it was like to be in the spotlight, huh? Oi, oi, give the guy some space, Christ. Katsuki tugged on the back of his sweater, hauling him out of their friends' clutches. Now all of you are a bunch of two-faced motherfuckers. You'll celebrate Deku's strike but not mine, huh? Maybe because Deku is a certified sweetheart and you're a trash goblin. Mina snorted with a shrill laugh that sent Ochako into her own fit of giggles. Hands on hips, Katsuki glowered at her, ignoring Kirishima's conciliatory shrug. Midoriya's a likable guy. Sorry, dude. Unfucking believable. Katsuki muttered, slumping back to his seat. Izuku joining him as the rest of the crew huddled around the menu and decided which milkshakes to order. You're likable too, Izuku said, smile still spread wide from the chaotic celebration. Katsuki just clicked his teeth in its husk, so Izuku nudged closer, letting their hands brush quickly while the others' backs were turned. Well, I like you, at least. Katsuki's ears flushed red, but he didn't turn his head from observing Hanta take his turn. Doesn't count. You like everyone. Izuku looked up to the ceiling, eye caught by the metallic glint of a semi-deflated helium balloon floating against the grid of tiles, probably abandoned after a kid's birthday party. That's true, he hummed, wondering how long it would take for the balloon to sink back down to the ground. But I like you the most. There was a slightly choked call from beside him. God damn it, Deku. What? Izuku spun in his seat, face flushing when he realized just how candid he'd been without thinking. He was met by the sight of slim fingers gripping the fabric of Katsuki's pants atop his thighs. Was he flustered? That was normally Izuku's job. Bakugo, Ida interrupted, booming voice carrying over several lanes. I believe it is your turn again. Please don't delay, we only have 15 minutes left of our allotted time. Clearing his throat again, Katsuki pushed himself up and went to study the various colorful bowling balls at his disposal. From the other side of the booth, Ochako glanced up from where she'd been giggling and gossiping with Mina. The two of them conspiratorially hunched over her phone. When she met Izuku's eye, she straightened, peeling away from Mina's side and sliding over into the empty seat beside him. Having a good time? She asked, big brown eyes shining. He smiled back at her, taking a moment to breathe in the vibrant atmosphere, the sound of fun and silliness pressing in on all sides. Yeah, he said, relaxed. I'm having a really good time. That's good, Izuku. I'm really pleased for you. Giving his hand a quick squeeze, she looked over to where Todoroki had joined Denki and offering Katsuki bowling advice, the two of them providing an unsolicited breakdown of all the ways in which Katsuki could work on his technique. He looked about on the verge of strangling them both. You know, I can't exactly pretend that I get it, Ochako said quietly, tucking a lock of hair behind her ear. From what I see of him, he seems like a huge jerk most of the time. But... She turned to look Izuku in the face, a picture of earnestness, eyes full of heart. But I can tell that he makes you happy. This past month or so, you've been different. In a good way. Less nervous, more at ease. I think he's been good for you. Izuku didn't even try to pretend like he didn't know what she was talking about. They were speaking low enough to be out of earshot anyway, and he'd always suspected Ochako knew more than she let on. Yeah, he said, chest swelling when he allowed himself to acknowledge it. He really pushes me out of my comfort zone. It makes me see things differently sometimes. Ochako considered for a moment, white flecks of light from a distant, kitschy mirror ball tracking across her face. I'm glad someone finally managed to get you to see things differently. See yourself differently. Her voice was overly chipper, only partially concealing the hint of sadness that lay beneath. To hear it tugged at Izuku's gut, and he reached out to clasp both of her hands, this time his turn to be earnest. Ochako, you did too, you know? He said firmly. You made me see things differently. When we met, I was miserable. I was sad and lonely and felt like there must be something wrong with me. And you just scooped me up and treated me like I mattered. If it wasn't for you, I don't know where I'd be today. Her lip began to quiver slightly, and Izuku felt his own mirror it. God, he was never going to stop being a crybaby whenever things became emotional. You're my best friend, he told her, squeezing her fingers probably a little too tight. I'm sorry I haven't shown you enough appreciation recently. I've been too distracted and... She shook her head adamantly. No, Izuku, come on. I'm happy that you're happy. You deserve this. But I should have. Please, seriously. No, I should have never. They stilled, babbling trailing off on both sides until they were just looking at one another dead in face, gripping each other's shoulders. One more beat of silence held before Ochako's cheeks puffed out in the way they always did when she was stifling a laugh. She sputtered into a giggle that immediately cut through the blue mood and set Izuku chuckling too, shoulders relaxing in relief. Fine, okay, he managed through a cheek-aching grin. You win. I'll stop feeling bad about neglecting you. Not neglecting. Okay. But can we please hang out soon? Just the two of us. Watch some old movies and eat too much popcorn? Ochako's smile grew softer, and she nodded, dropping her hands from his shoulder. Of course, I'd like that. Good. Flopping back against the booth, Izuku cast a glance at the rest of their party. His eyes, of course, were drawn to Katsuki, so casually cool in a black tee that showed off his biceps, and deceptively expensive sweatpants Izuku had learned were categorized as athleisure. Even in winter, he ran hot as a furnace, not requiring all the additional layers of clothing others bothered with. So, are you two, official yet? Ochako's voice startled Izuku out of his not-too-subtle appreciation and back to reality. We haven't discussed it. Over the 6 or so weeks that they've been seeing each other, the conversation had not come up. Izuku had spent a lot of time wondering, sure, particularly since things had progressed from a physical standpoint. But every time he considered raising the question, it always felt too soon, like it might spoil the moment, or cause his stomach to desert him forever if he even tried. Ochako sounded surprised. You haven't talked about it? No. Izuku jammed the thumb into his mouth and nibbled at the nail. Do you think that's weird? I don't know what he'd say, or what he feels about that kind of thing. But you two have... you've... She leaned in closer, hair brushing his cheek. You've done stuff, right? Ochako! With the amount of blood that immediately rushed into Izuku's face, it was a wonder his vision didn't turn completely red. At least it meant that he didn't actually need to respond in order for Ochako to get the message. Both eyebrows shot up her forehead knowingly, but she leaned back in her seat and kept her lips zipped. He looks at you, you know, she said after a pause, voice soft. When he thinks no one's looking. He thinks he's being discreet, but I've noticed it. Izuku's heart fluttered in his chest. He does? Mm-hmm. There was another uproarious cheer from the rest of the group as Todoroki sent the ball gliding down the lane like it was drifting across ice, scattering all pins aside. It tipped his score just 2 points ahead of Katsuki in the game's final round. I think you should ask him, Ochako said, linking their arms together and pulling Izuku up with her. It might be good to know where you stand. Izuku nodded silently, even though the thought made him feel vaguely nauseous. Luckily, the scoreboard began to beep to signal the end of their session, and Kirishima bounded over before Ochako could pursue the topic any further. Dudes! He cried, leaving a puzzled-looking Shoto at the mercy of Kaminari and Sero, both hell-bent on rubbing the last-minute victory in Katsuki's face. We were thinking we could all hang out in the arcade for a while, maybe grab some food. What do you think? Sure! Sounds great. Jostling each other, the freshly formed squad of 9 started up the steps towards the arcade, breaking into meaningless chatter with Izuku and Katsuki at the rear. Izuku was just about to commend Katsuki on his form as a means of clearing the scowl from his face, when there was a loud crash behind them, followed by several gasps. The commotion set the group turning. Shit! Something was going down a few lanes over. A small group clustered in a circle, a couple of them crouched to the floor. Izuku squinted. It was hard to tell exactly what was going on, but several members of the group had hands clamped over their mouths, face set in expressions of worry and concern. It put Izuku's nerves on edge. One of the people on their knees looked up and called out, Does anyone here know first aid? The surrounding groups fell into silence, the only voice, the throaty tone of Bonnie Tyler still playing through the speakers. No one moved, everyone looking to the person next to them. Someone had to do something. I do. Izuku's mouth formed the words before his brain had a chance to catch up, his legs carrying him forward without conscious thought. In he went, charging, stumbling, swallowing his nervousness and approaching the huddled group of people. At the center of them was a young woman, probably in her early 20s, on her knees and groaning. She hit her head. The man crouched next to her explained, eyes wide and round as saucers. She tripped and fell and hit her head on that. He gestured at the ball dispenser beside them, all hard metal with several angular corners. I don't know what to do. Something about the tremble in the man's fingers, the way his voice cracked at the end of the sentence, set a series of cogs in motion in Izuku's brain. There was no time to pay attention to the prickles at the back of his neck or the cold slide of sweat down his spine. Okay, he said, getting to his knees next to the woman. She turned to look at him with bleary eyes, tears streaking black lines of mascara over her cheeks. Hello, what's your name? Naomi. Her voice was shaky, but it was a good start. She was conscious, aware of her surroundings. Izuku tried to make his own voice soft and steady, reassuring, despite the fact his heart was hammering at breakneck speed in his chest. He prayed to God he could remember everything he'd learned on the 3-day first aid intensive he'd attended as a Boy Scout, plus the copious research notes he'd made afterwards. Hi, Naomi. My name's Izuku. I'm going to try to help you, okay? She nodded and promptly winced. Try not to move if you can. Let's keep you nice and still. I'm just going to take a look at your head for you. Izuku raised himself on his knees and peered at the back of her head. He could just make out the steady stain of crimson seeping through pale blonde hair. Shit. He took a deep breath. Stay calm to keep the patient calm. Turning to the man on his left, Izuku forced himself to keep his tone even. Please, can you run to the front desk? They should have a first aid kit, he said quietly. Right. The floor squeaked as the man scrambled to his feet and scurried away. No wonder Naomi had tripped. The floors really were a hazard without the right footwear. Izuku turned to the rest of the group. Has anyone got a pack of Kleenex? Any napkins? One of the women looming over them fumbled in her purse and hurriedly handed over a half-empty packet of tissues. Izuku took it with a nod, opening them and pulling out a wad as he spoke. And have any of you called 911 yet? There was a sob from beside him. 911? Is it that bad? Izuku laid a hand on Naomi's arm. Don't worry, it's all going to be fine. I just think it would be a good idea to have you properly checked out to make sure you're okay. He gave her his best smile. But I'm going to take care of you until then. Another member of the group had a phone in hand, stabbing at the screen and stepping slightly away. Hello? She said, voice thin and slightly high. Yeah, a friend of mine fell and hit her head and there's a lot of blood. Okay, yes, thank you. We're at Mike's bowling alley. Good. At least the paramedics would be on their way soon. In the meantime, given the stricken looks from everyone in the immediate vicinity, it looked like Izuku was pretty much on his own. He took another quick look at the back of the woman's head. The bloom of red had deepened, oozing through strands of hair, spreading down towards her nape. It was hard to tell how bad the gash really was. He knew that head wounds could bleed like hell and seem much worse than they actually were, but he wouldn't know for sure without getting a proper look. I'm going to press this tissue to your head, okay? Izuku said as he readied the carefully folded white square, just to stop some of the bleeding. I'm bleeding? Oh my god. Shh. It's okay, I've got you. Izuku soothed. Nothing good could come from panic. I'm going to be really gentle. You just tell me if it hurts. As carefully as he could, Izuku pressed the wad over what appeared to be the source of the bleed. That okay? He asked, and when she whispered out a yes, he applied more pressure. Good. Beneath his fingers, he could feel the curve of bone, nothing indented or sharp. Hopefully no skull fracture then. How's your vision, Naomi? He asked, looking down to meet her eyes. Can you see clearly, or is it anything blurry? No, I can see fine. Okay, that's great. And do you feel dizzy at all? Just a bit woozy. That made sense. She was probably in shock. Still, better safe than sorry. It could be a concussion. Izuku called over to the woman on the phone. How's the ambulance doing? It's on its way now. Okay, fine. It was all going to be fine. Weirdly, Izuku felt almost trance-like, as if he stepped out of the reality where nerves and anxiety ruled his every move, and into another realm where everything was in sharper focus, acutely aware that this person needed him. After a couple minutes, Naomi's friend slid back beside him, shoving a first response kit to the floor. Just in time, too. As it was at that moment, Naomi groped fingers across the back of her head, eyes widening when she brought them in front of her face and found them sticky and bright red. She began to wail. Can you take over for a sec? Izuku asked a friend, gesturing towards the hand he had pressed to Naomi's head and unzipping the bag with the other. The man nodded and slid his fingers over the tissue, allowing Izuku both hands free to locate a pack of disposable gloves, using the rubbery latex over his fingers. He grabbed a pack of antiseptic wipes and a pad of gauze. He shuffled closer and inspected carefully. Although the tissue had stemmed the flow, it wasn't totally soaked through with blood, which probably meant it was safe to remove it without dislodging any clotting. I'm going to clean the wound and take a look, okay? Signaling his makeshift assistant to remove the Kleenex, Izuku eased Naomi's hair aside. With one hand, he blotted any fresh blood, and with the other, began tentatively cleaning it away with the wipe. There was a gagging noise behind him. Sorry, oh god, I hate blood, someone spluttered. Izuku did his best to ignore them. Up close, the cut really wasn't that bad. A small gash, an inch or so wide. Open, sure, but pretty clean looking. She'd probably only need a few stitches and some painkiller at most. A wave of relief surged over Izuku as initial panic ebbed away, safe in the knowledge that everything really was going to be okay. He'd been saying it all along, and thank God it was true. You're going to be fine, he said with as much certainty as he could muster. It's really quite small. They'll have you patched up in no time. His heart continued to pound as he finished wiping away the blood and reapplied pressure with the gauze, reaching for a bandage from the kit and winding it around her head to keep everything snugly in place. I'm sorry, I might make you look a little bit like a mummy, he said softly. I'm sure the professionals will neaten things up. For the first time since the incident began, Naomi's sniffle had a hint of a laugh to it. I bet I look ridiculous, she murmured as Izuku finished fixing the bandage and tucked the ends neatly in place. He dropped back down to rest on his heels so he could look at her properly. Her skin was blanched, pale and tear-stained, eyes red and cheeks swollen. She was still scared and in pain. Izuku rested a hand on her shoulder. I think you look pretty great, especially given the circumstances. She offered up the tiniest of smiles, a small tug of lips that sent a zigzag jolt of emotion through Izuku's bones, a mixture of pride and exhilaration and empathy all tangled together. It was a good feeling. He stayed by her side for the full 20 minutes or so before the ambulance arrived, talking to her softly, making sure she was comfortable and keeping an eye on the dressings. Looking up at last to the sight of a paramedic striding down the steps with all the reassuring confidence of a seasoned medical professional. Hey folks, what is it we're dealing with? Izuku pushed himself up from his knees. Hello, thanks for coming. This lady, Naomi. Her name's Naomi. She slipped and hit the back of her head on the ball dispenser, and there was quite a lot of blood. But I've cleaned the wound and had a look, and there doesn't seem to be any skull fracture, although I'm no expert. There might be. I just had a feel of her scalp. I couldn't find anything. And, the wound is about 2.5 centimeters in length, but the bleeding seems to have stopped with applied pressure. Oh, and I asked about dizziness, blurred vision, all of that. She seems to be okay, but I'm not certain whether there's a possibility of concussion and... Whoa, kid. The paramedic took a step forward, a bemused smile playing over his lips as he approached. Remember to take a breath, huh? We don't want a second patient on our hands if you keel over. Izuku bit his lip and fidgeted with the hem of his shirt. Sorry, yes, of course. The man, a relatively young, blonde-haired guy, with an easygoing demeanor that would put him as much at place in a nightclub as a medical emergency, grinned again. Hey dude, it's cool. It looks like you've done a great job. You did all the right things. He took up position next to Naomi, introducing himself as Keigo, and quickly shooting off a list of questions to assess the severity of her injuries, ending with a joke that had her smiling. A thud of boots down the stairs behind them announced the arrival of his colleague. A tall, muscular woman approached with a savage grin. She looked like she could take down a bear single-handed. We're out of a job, Rumi, the blonde guy called over his shoulder. This kid had done all the hard work already. Yeah? The woman raised a brow. Badass, well done. Izuku smiled weakly, feeling the adrenaline that had been steadily pulsing through his veins begin to fade, a bone-deep wave of exhaustion taking its place. He fought it back long enough to watch as the medics did their thing, paying close attention to the way they rewrapped the bandage, noting the practiced swiftness in their fingers, the soothing hush to their voices as they spoke. The whole ordeal probably only lasted 45 minutes in total, but by the time Naomi was ready to be led away, Izuku felt as if he just run a marathon with a 20-pound weight on his back. As she stood, carefully supported by the two medics on either side of her, she reached out to clasp Izuku's hand. Thank you, she said, pale blue eyes wide and palms clammy. Thank you so much for helping me, Izuku, for talking to me. I'm so glad you were here. The embers in Izuku's heart that had been dwindling in the aftermath of all the chaos flared back into life, warmth spreading from his chest and every little nook of his being. He squeezed her hands back. Please, I just wanted to help. Thank goodness you're okay. The intimidating brick house paramedic clapped a hand on his shoulder with enough force to make Izuku's knees buckle. You did good here today, kid, she said. Not everyone can keep their head under pressure, believe me. Keigo nodded sagely as they began to make their exit. You'd be surprised at the amount of people who freak out at the sight of blood. Case in point, several of Naomi's friends were huddled together on a bench the next lane over, still looking on with worried faces. A couple of them had stuck close by, and were insisting on riding with her to the hospital at least. Oh, and kid, you better get back to your friends. They've been hovering over like a bunch of agitated barn owls for the last 20 minutes. Keigo widened his eyes and blinked rapidly a few times, murmuring a low hoot hoot as they walked away. Rumi cackled like a witch. You kill me, dude. Izuku turned, swaying slightly on the spot. Sure enough, back toward the lane in which they played their game were his friends, bunched together and looking at him as if he'd just performed open heart surgery in the middle of the bowling alley. They weren't the only ones with eyes on him either. Various other groups had congregated together on the periphery of the incident, although they all quickly turned away as his gaze fell on them. Everyone loved the spectacle after all. Before anyone else could approach, Katsuki strode forward, hunching slightly so his face was at Izuku's level. Hey, you okay? Yeah, Izuku swallowed. Something still buzzed in his brain, like a flickering light bulb vying for attention, the high not yet fully dissipated. Just drained, I guess. Familiar, fierce eyes met his, a steadying hand on his shoulder. That was fucking epic. I was gonna come help you, but there were already a shit ton of people over here. And to be honest, you looked like you had everything under control. I don't know. She needed someone to help her, and so you help. Izuku slicked the tongue over his lips, suddenly aware of how dry his mouth was. It wasn't something he'd noticed when he was in the midst of all the action. Yeah, I guess I did. He let the fact sink in for a second, allowing himself the indulgence of a tiny self-congratulatory smile. Only for a second, though, before the rest of the group spilled over in a breathless, awestruck mass. Oh my god, Midoriya. You're officially the coolest guy in the entire freaking world. How did you know what to do, Izuku? You basically saved that woman's life. I'm totally nominating you for prom king, cutie. There's nothing you can do about it. Smiling properly at the sudden deluge of excited praise and hands patting his back and his head and any other inch of him they could reach, Izuku flapped his arms to fend them off. Guys, I hardly did anything. Only some basic first aid. Katsuki was by his side. Words not required when the scowl on his face served as a nonverbal reminder to respect Izuku's space. It worked, and the others backed off. Seriously, man, that was amazing, Eijiro said, nodding his head enthusiastically. He turned to Katsuki. Sorry, dude, but I think we're all 100% Team Midoriya now. Your boyfriend's just next level cool. Boyfriend? An awkward silence fell, only broken by Eijiro's cracked whimper of pain, when Mina stomped down hard on his foot. What? He cried, disgruntled, before his face dropped. Oh shit. Shit indeed. Izuku looked down, avoiding the 8 pairs of eyes he could feel on him like a brand, the blood thrumming in his ears as he tried to think, tried to come up with some smart-ass retort that would both cut through the tension and deny the label without arousing suspicion. Because that's what they should do, right? Deny it? Crap. Kachan was gonna be so mad. Maybe he'd be too angry to ever speak to Izuku again, or would start acting all distant in the fear that more people would figure things out about them, or... Of course he's fucking cool, learned from the best, didn't he? Izuku's head flickered to the side of its own accord, staring open-mouthed at the defiant toe of Katsuki's jaw. There was a pause from everyone else around them, before the group whirled into life as if nothing had happened. As if you're cool, Mina scoffed. At the same time, the Kaminari theatrically called out, "Teach me too, Bakugo! I want to learn from the best!" Izuku could only swallow thickly, heart soaring in his chest. Shuffling from foot to foot, he tried to ignore the way Ochako was attempting to catch his eye, her face all too smug. Should we go to the arcade like we planned?" he suggested, trying to divert the attention away from himself and Katsuki as much as possible. "Good idea." Hanta led the march, peering over his shoulder at Todoroki. "Burgers are on the bowling champion, right, Shota?" Brow crinkled ever so slightly, Todoroki trailed after him. "Well, I suppose I could afford it, as long as you all pick the kids' meal." Izuku held back, waiting for the others to go on ahead. Something had shifted inside him, a tightly wound thread unraveling, a weight lifted. He suddenly felt like he had space to breathe. "We better catch up with the idiot brigade before they break something." Katsuki's voice sounded from behind him, gruff and a little hoarse. When Izuku turned, he was met with high cheekbones stained with a dusky pink. It was an evening of revelations, and of making Katsuki Bakugo blush, it seemed. "Yeah, we should," he said, taking a moment to look up at that golden face, that crown of spiky hair. He breathed in deep before he spoke next, letting happiness warm his skin like a pleasant midday sun. "Before we do, I thought I would just..." He paused and tried again. Thank you." Katsuki's eyebrows pinched. "For what?" "Just for being you, I guess." Shrugging, Katsuki's eyes briefly flitted to Izuku's mouth. "It's what I do best." "Sure is." At a loss for anything more to say, Izuku rubbed the side of his neck and looked around. "Okay, well, yeah, should we?" "Mm-hmm." They started up the steps, side by side, shoulder to shoulder, so close their arms brushed as they walked. The second time the backs of their hands skimmed, Katsuki made a grab and tangled their fingers together. "Ready to watch me ruin you at Street Fighter?" Izuku looked down between them, at his palm captured, held. He thought his heart might just about explode. "Well," he replied, grin tacked in place so that he wouldn't cry. "I guess we'll see about that."